And the object of this session, we've spent a lot of time talking about the creative aspect of writing. We've talked about editing, cover design. We've just then touched in on the actual sort of production process of getting your book uploaded and ready for sale on Amazon and other retailers should you choose to. So what comes next? And this is really what this is all about. So how do you get that sort of wheel turning? How do you start building brand and loyalty? So let's dive straight in. Mark, so you've written your book, you've set it up for publication. What do you first start thinking about in terms of how are you going to market that book? How are you going to find your readers?
Well, for me, the first thing I'd do would be email my list of 65,000 readers on a mailing list. That would be the first thing I'd do. But if I was coming at this afresh right from the start, I'd be looking to start to build that list. So I'd put what we call a CTA, or a call to action, in the back of the book, inviting people to visit my mailing my website where they can get something in exchange for signing up. I'd be looking at pricing. I might even consider looking at giving that book away as a kind of a loss leader to get people to join the list. And I'd be focusing on that really relentlessly for the first 6-12 months, just trying to continue to build that list, because all the time I'm writing the second book. So the second piece of advice for building your presence is to write the next book. That's the next thing that you should be doing, especially if you're writing in a series like I do.
Okay. And Louise, what goes through your mind as you lay down the pen and start sort of putting your marketing hat on?
Well, I agree with Mark as well about the mailing list, but, going back in time to the first book, and if I were to advise anyone just starting out, mailing list, but also I think that actually people forget that the decision about what kind of platform they're going to use is a marketing decision in itself. So, whether you decide to do what they call go wide and, use several different platforms, or stick with Amazon KDP and just stay exclusive, does have marketing implications. So for me, I think that when you're starting out, it makes sense, or at least in my opinion, to stick with one exclusive platform, because particularly with Amazon, because you have a wider market share. So if you're wanting to kind of try and push your first book in your first try out there up the rankings, which will in turn help your second book, you have more of a chance of doing that if you stay with one marketplace and one platform than if you were to dilute it across several at that point in your career. So I think that that's a marketing decision in itself, and which is why I went with Amazon KDP, and that's worked out very well across 4, now 5 books. So. And
when you first set out, where did you first see signs that readers were finding your book, engaging with your storytelling?
Well, I mean, before I even uploaded it, it was through the blog, as I said before. I think that people did start to engage and give me some, I would say, very early commentary on that. And it was kind of a rudimentary mailing list in its own way, and that's before the book was then uploaded, and you have more of a formal mailing list that, Mark's talking about. But after that time, it was through things like social media, just good old-fashioned email as well. And I think that if you've set yourself up, that gives people, lots of options to be able to get in touch. So even if they go onto your Amazon author page, you've got lots of different ways for people to contact you there. There's your website. Everything should direct back to each other. It should all sort of work with each other more or less seamlessly, so that if you go to any one of these different outlets, it directs you to the others as well. So I think bearing that in mind, you start to notice quite a lot of feedback early on through several of the different outlets there.
Okay, great. And Catherine, so when you first started out, how did you sort of see that whole marketing piece? And I guess, how would that contrast with your traditional publishing versus your independent publishing?
Well, I feel like when I first self-published, it was like the dark ages compared to what's available now. It was 2010, and I didn't quite know what I was doing. I was kind of stumbling around in the dark. So when my first book came out, what I did was I started a blog in advance of the book coming out, so maybe about 6 months out, and I started blogging about my self-publishing experience. Now, the problem is, of course, today everyone is doing that, but back then it was at least had a bit of a specialness about it. And I joined Twitter, and I got on Facebook, and I absolutely agree, mailing list, because, when I was younger, we were all mad about, you know, things like Bebo, which if you're not Irish, you probably don't even know what that is. But, you know, MySpace went away, Facebook, everyone's getting quite fed up with it at the moment. So we just don't know what's going to be around in terms of social media in 3 years, 5 years' time. But I don't think email is going anywhere. And as, you know, I mean, I would love to be in Mark's position of, you know, when my book comes out, I have 65,000 people I can instantly send a link to. I mean, that's the dream. So for me, the mailing list is really important. But that's what I did when I was self-publishing. When it came to having my books traditionally published, I really like to cover all angles. So I like to kind of cover the logistical, you know, very sort of hard numbers marketing. So having a blog, setting up a mailing list, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all these kind of things. But I also like to have a kind of more sort of organic plan as well. And I really engage a lot with book bloggers. So I'm quite cynical in that when I'm actually writing my book, I'm thinking already, is there something I can write into this chapter that might help with marketing, you know, down the line? So little things like, I don't know, I mean, you might have something in your book as you're writing it and you might mention a brand of coffee or something. Well, that means that, you know, you might have something you can do with that when the book comes out. So certainly when I was writing Distress Signals, I mean, there was no end. I was ordering. One of the plot points in Distress Signals is that a note is found on a post-it and the post-it is branded with the cruise ship logo, because it's, you know, the way you get, there's post-its outside today with KDP on them, you get branded post-its. So immediately I was like, I'm getting branded post-its, and that's, you know, what we sent to bloggers and things like that. So I think, you know, if you're writing books, you are a creative person. And I think there is probably no end to the ideas you can have of how to market your book. But I definitely think you need to cover both bases. You need to be setting up your mailing list and things like that. And then also having a bit of fun with, you know, is there something I can send to book bloggers that will get their attention? Is there something nice I can put in with, with the proof copy and things like that? So I tried to cover both bases. But certainly when I was self-publishing, originally I was a lot more focused just on, you know, establishing a platform. And now that the hard work really has been done, I mean, I continue to, you know, add to it as much as I can. But these days I feel like I can have a bit more fun and, you know, think up some sort of crazy ideas. Not all of them work, but, you know, I'm happy. That's the main thing.
And do you market across your independent publishing and your traditional publishing? Are they connected? Like,
yeah, I mean,
plans?
I have one website. Everything feeds into that. I mean, I liked what Louise said about everything should be connected seamlessly. Like, I like to think of it as a roundabout. Okay, so, you know, one road is Twitter, one road is Facebook, one road is Instagram, etc. And if you get on, you better be going all the way around, you know. So I love to find ways to connect things. So like if, you know, when I released my book on self-publishing, I said, you know, if you go to my website, there's extra content. So then there's a reason to go there and, you know, sign up to this. You should be trying to get everybody like into your net in a non-malicious way while you're self-publishing. Because once you have a reader, my God, like hang on to them, you know, and make sure you get them into a place where the next time your book comes out, they're going to know about it. Or when your next book comes out, they're going to know about it.
So when you've got those first few readers, and I guess for many authors, initially it will be a handful of readers to begin with. How do you start marketing to them without overdoing it and without sort of putting them off?
Yeah, what I used to say, like back in the day, the dark ages, is that you have to ask yourself, why are people online? And I really believe that it's one of generally three reasons. So they want to be entertained, they want information, or they want to connect. And connect in a way as in, you know, maybe we have a similar interest, maybe we're both self-publishing, they want to see, or maybe they just relate to something you write. And I like to use the example of book trailers, right? So there's some great book trailers. There was a book trailer made a few years ago by two authors who had used CreateSpace, who were, I don't know if it's still online, but they were obsessed with their Amazon ranking. And it was a husband and a wife, and the husband was ordering books to up the wife's ranking because that put her in a better mood. And then unbeknownst to him, he's buying, you know, it's happening the other way around as well. And I always ask the question, if I'm putting content online, and I take away the bit about buy my book, what remains? And if you find you find a good book trailer and it makes you laugh, like if you took away the fact that the person who made it is selling a book, you're still left with one of those three things. You're left with entertainment. And when I was blogging about self-publishing, yes, I was mentioning my books, but if I took that away, I still had information that was useful to people. So I think you have to take away the publicity bit and see, is there something left? And that's why, you know, these people who just constantly tweet, you know, my book is $1.99 here now, and they never add any value to it, they're not going to get anywhere, because who is on Twitter, you know, or who is reading blogs, or who is anywhere online just to be sold to all the time? So I always do that little test. If I take away the publicity aspect of this content, can it stand by itself? And if I can, then okay.
Interesting. And do you market to the author community as well? Obviously,
no?
Okay.
I do not. And, you know, I don't see this as much anymore, but I do feel in the beginning that was a big issue, that people had this idea that if you were self-published and they were self-published, you know, we'd buy each other's books and that was the way it would go. I mean, that'd be great, but like, that's not the way it works. I love my fellow authors and I connect with them as much as I can. There's great support. They will, you know, retweet me and they will promote my book and everything, but I don't try to sell to them as such, you know.
Okay, and Mark, you've spoken obviously about your mailing list. Are authors on that mailing list? Are you interacting with the author community as part of your marketing?
Quite a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, because obviously I teach authors how to do it as well, so I know a lot of authors will sign up just to run through the automation, the automatic process of emails that people get as they come onto the list. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I do get, we've got kind of a Facebook group of about 4,000 authors for the non-fiction side of the business, and you'd be surprised how many authors come on and the first thing they post is buy my book. It's like, what are you doing?
I actually wouldn't be surprised.
What are you doing? You're not, then, you know, authors are there to learn about writing. They're not there to buy books. There's a different space for that. So, I mean, I was guilty of that when I started out. I would have been on Twitter going, buy my book, please. But it doesn't work. No one does that. And I completely agree that you need to be giving value all the time. And the sales will come. I mean, the kind of ratio I look at, maybe it's like 1 to 20. So I will occasionally say, I've got a deal on, so you can take advantage of it here. But the other 19 posts will be on Thursdays on my Facebook page. I have Throwback Thursday, which is basically a stupid picture of me when I was like 6. And you'd be surprised. For, you know, I write gritty thrillers, but I like to I'm different from my characters, and I like my readers to feel that they can get to know me a bit. And I'm not afraid to laugh at myself in stupid pictures that my mum scanned for me. So that works quite well. And on Fridays, I'll have TFI Friday, what are you doing at the weekend? And we can have conversations. And I did one... Oh, what did I do yesterday? I've got two titles for the new book I'm working on, and I'm legitimately not sure which one I'm going to go for, or I wasn't. And I put a little Facebook poll up saying, you know, which one would you like? And I've had, I think, 400 responses. And apart from the fact that shows my readers that I value their opinion and they can be involved in the creative process before they get the book to read, it's also really bloody useful for me, because now I know that one of them was 85%, the other was 15%. So that question is answered now. So it's all about I think that you can sum it up by just being a nice person. And then good things happen.
As simple as that. And that, obviously, that customer feedback is incredibly important. Louise, when it comes to customer reviews, how important are they as part of the marketing plan? Do you specifically factor in the customer review element of it, or do you just let it happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reviews are hugely important. You know, I think that, again, you have to think of it as a digital marketplace as opposed to just, you know, walking into a bookstore where you can't really see any reviews whatsoever about what this book is about. But if you go onto the Amazon Kindle store, you know, you can see straight away what the overall star rating is. And so it's a big marketing point. Likewise with things like Goodreads. And, you know, there are things that you can do. And first of all, I think it comes back to what both Catherine and Mark have said, is that you need to be responsive to people and you know, be a nice person about it. But the more interactive you are with people, the more honest they're likely to be. And I think that it can be quite daunting facing reviews, certainly particularly when you're starting out. Well, actually, I'm kidding. You know, it never gets easier. It never gets easier. You pretend it gets easier. So, you know, it is a frightening prospect, and nobody really wants to hear from time to time that there's anything wrong remotely with this 100,000-word novel that you've put your heart and soul into. But if there is, you need to know about it, because that's the business head that you have to put on, and you have to be objective. So reviews are enormously important. And I also try to encourage them wherever possible as well. So, as Catherine said earlier, you can, as part of the marketing, you can send out proof copies of your book in advance just to get a bit of feedback about it and see what people are like responding to it, and all of that kind of thing. But in between times, I think it's also important and will, I think, at the end of the day, encourage people to leave reviews as well if they feel invested in you, because they know it's important to you to have that kind of feedback, because not everybody realizes how important reviews are. They just read a book, think, oh, that was great, and carry on with their lives. They don't, it's not necessarily part of their sort of ordinary lives to go and pop on and leave a review. So encouraging that is more about all of the indirect approach. So what Mark and Catherine have said, if on your Facebook author page you're just posting little daft things in between times when you're in your writing period, when there isn't any new active material to read to engage readers, you sort of engaging with them in other ways and on a human level, so that they firstly remember who you are and also enjoy seeing these funny little posts that you put up every now and again. And then when it comes to the new book coming out, they're really excited about it, and it doesn't seem like such a long period of time between each book and the last.
And do you use the reviews? Will you quote from reviews in your sort of PR activity, those kind of things?
Yes, you can do. I mean, I think it used to be the case that, say if you're a traditionally published author, you would go to sort of broadsheets for sort of press reviews and things like that. It's a slightly different world, I think, as an independent author. You can do that, but I think it's equally as effective to have a very prolific book blogger, for example, or just a very kind Amazon reader, because, to be honest with you, they're the people who are mattering in all of this. So, just put Amazon reader, wonderful quote from somebody, and it doesn't need to be, Times Literary Supplement, much as we admire them. It can be someone who really got the book, and that can encourage readers.
And Catherine, touching on that sort of press reviews point, do you, as well as getting reader reviews, will you make a concerted effort to try and drive press reviews, sort of printed media reviews?
In terms of the self-published books? I certainly tried back at the beginning, but I think what we have to remember is when we open a newspaper and we see book reviews in it, they're not reviewing those books for the good of their health. They're reviewing those books because it's a service to the newspaper's readers. And those readers expect then to go into a bookshop and see those books. So, I never had any expectation that I would get media reviews in terms of broadsheet newspapers, anything like that for my self-published books, just because, when you go into the bookshop, they weren't there. I was predominantly selling online. What I tried to do is I tried to get, I hate buzzwords, but influencers, who would be sort of trusted, I suppose, to read the book. So when my self-publishing guide came out, I went to the lovely Mel Sherratt, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, and she gave me a glowing review for it. So she went straight in on my my editorial reviews on Amazon. And I got people like Vanessa from Writing.ie, and I got other people who were sort of well known in terms of publishing instruction and things like that. Because I think what you're looking for really is credibility. And credibility can come from one person whose opinion everyone trusts, or it can come from the fact that, you have 50 anonymous Amazon reviewers who all think your book is great. So it's just a case of trying to get an overall, that when people come and look at your listing, the evidence is there that the majority of people think, you're hot stuff, and someone else will buy your book because of it. So I don't like to waste my time. I don't like to chase things that I don't think I'm going to, get. And I do think media reviews for a self-published book can be quite tricky. But book bloggers, as you mentioned, they're so passionate, and they don't really care who published the book or how it was published. If they love it, they will hugely support it, and I think it's people like that you should be focusing your time on.
Interesting. And Mark, so where do you balance that sort of generating reviews, email, against price promotion and sort of real sales drivers that you can create? Does one go before the other? Do they work hand in hand?
Well, the sequence I have is someone joins my mailing list. It'll be first a welcome to the mailing list. Here's a couple of free books, and then it will be did you get the free books one, because people have trouble sometimes sideloading files onto devices, so you try and solve that. Or perhaps the first one went into spam or promotions on Gmail, which is a pain in the neck, but you can try and resolve that problem. And then after that, one of the early ones would be would you leave a review? And I find as soon as I explained why it was helpful personally for someone to leave a review, people tend to be quite nice about those kinds of things when they understand that it's helpful. If they've just read a book that they've enjoyed and you tell them practically why a review would be helpful, for example, getting a promotion with a company like BookBub. If anyone doesn't know who BookBub is, it's an enormous US-based promotion site that sends out emails to millions of readers, and they can have a huge effect on sales, but they're very difficult to get. One of their criteria is you need a good number of reviews. So if you explain to readers that a BookBub review could be a really significant factor in your new career, and you could help personally by leaving a review, people often will do that. So I find just kind of humanising it. This is going to be a thread that runs through the whole session, I think. Just humanising it and explaining why it's helpful can make a big difference.
And so would you do that to generate some review content and then think about price promotion?
Probably, yeah. I mean, you want to add social proof to your product page, and social proof in this case is weight of reviews. I think once you get to about 50, eventually they just generate their own momentum. So kind of my data would suggest that you're going to get one review every 100 sales, and maybe one review every 1,000 free downloads. So that's the kind of ratio that you're looking at. But once you've got up to 50, that's the kind of number that you need to get into those promotion sites. So it doesn't make too much sense to expend significantly more effort to get to 100, because you'll get there eventually anyway once you've got the momentum built up.
Okay. And is that the same for you, Louise? How do you think about price promotion, like the countdown deals and the free days? Do you have a set pattern that you follow for each book?
Not particularly. I think I'm just responsive to how each book is performing, to be honest. I think the big aspect of the flexibility of this platform is that you can be very acutely responsive to things like that, and you can watch how it's performing in each of them together and how they cross-fertilise. I think the more books that you have, and in my case, coming on to the 5th book, it's sort of easier to see how each one affects the other. So obviously, say with the first book in a series, that's going to be quite a linchpin, because it's the first one that people will read and it directs them to your series. So you might want to sort of look at that one as being quite pivotal as to directing people to the next. So I think that I keep quite a close eye on how that one performs just in general, but, keep an overview. And I think the answer is just to be responsive. I don't have set times of the year where I think, okay, now we need a promotion. It's sort of, I keep an eye on the rankings, on how they're performing and how people are continuing to react to them as well. I think likewise, as we've said elsewhere, it's not just about price promotion, it's also about making necessary changes, if you have to other elements of the brand. So say there's something wrong with, I don't know, the formatting, or there's something wrong with the quality of the product itself. That's something that you need to be constantly aware of and keep checking, and reviews can be very helpful with that as well, getting that coming straight through, and you can respond straight away.
You mentioned there about keeping an eye on things. What are the indicators you're looking for? Is it that the sales are building, or that they're not building? How does that play out?
Well, I mean, in my case, it becomes easier, and this is to do with all of the things like mailing list. Every time you launch a new book, you can then rely on the fact that you have a readership already established. So there will be people who have signed up and who haven't signed up, but who are aware of you and have, hopefully, fingers crossed, enjoyed what you've done already. And if they have, they will keep an eye out for your next book. And if they haven't, Amazon very kindly remind them from time to time. So, you get those emails through at sort of 1 o'clock in the morning. You may also enjoy. And so when it pings up on me, I love getting the emails myself. And of course, it's purely because I check my own books. That we've noticed that you've checked these books. Are you interested in buying them? And I think, So, it all comes together, and, you can do your own part with it as well. But I think there are sort of peaks and troughs. So when the new book comes out, you will build, and because all of your readership who are already existing will discover the book again and be watching out for it. It makes a difference if you have also put the book up on pre-order as well. So, you will get pre-order sales in advance of the actual book being released, and then also another spike usually when the book is released, because some people just prefer to buy it when it's there. So, there are certain patterns that you can follow. And then, I would say in my experience, if you've written a book that people are enjoying, then it will sort of hold its position, hopefully, and then very gradually tail off, which is just the natural course of how things would progress. And then as things start to dip and you're writing, hopefully, the next book or in the middle of the next one, you might consider at that time giving it a little boost just to kind of keep it going until the next book comes out.
And is that the same for you, Catherine? Do you have a view in your mind with your independent publishing and your traditional publishing as to how the promotional cycle should work? Are you telling your publisher how they should be promoting your book?
No. No. My publisher is great because I have worked for a major publisher helping them with their social media, which is actually a job I got purely out of what I had done with my self-published books. And so now myself and my traditional publisher is quite collaborative, and in fairness to them, they kind of just let me off to do my social media stuff myself because, you know, that's the way I want it. And if I need something from them, they're happy to provide it. I mean, I would say that, I used to say that, most girls, little girls, when they're growing up, you know, they're dreaming about their wedding or whatever, whereas I was always dreaming about my book launch. And I had helped other authors, you know, with promotion ideas, and, you know, we might meet for coffee and I'd give them some ideas and stuff, but I was saving all the best ideas for myself. So when the book was coming out, when I got my book deal, and by then I had more than a year to wait for my book to come out, which is something, you know, self-published authors don't have to worry about. But that whole time I was planning what I was going to do and when I was going to do it. I think like the key is to have a plan, because I meet an awful lot of authors who are so focused on, you know, how do I get a book on KDP and how long does it take? But, you know, they're so focused on the nuts and bolts of the actual publishing process that they don't put enough time into sitting back and thinking, hang on, you know, I need to be thinking 3-6 months ahead, maybe a year ahead. If I had my time over again, I mean, I would have done things quite differently. I certainly would have kept quiet until I had 2 books out, because I think a lot of these things, you know, the countdown deals, the free days, BookBub, all that, even Goodreads giveaways and things like that, to really get the true benefit of those things, you need to have at least 2 books. Because, you know, if you do a free day, like, what better benefit is there than to have someone try your book for free, like it, and then have a fairly full-priced, you know, book that they can go and buy straight away. So if I was doing my time over again, I would publish a book, not put too much, not even, just leave it there, see how it goes, and maybe 6 months later release the second one, and then get to work and try and stay on that kind of schedule. Because I think all these things we're talking about, like, they really have the best benefits the more books you have, which I think, you know, Louise touched on already. So that's what I would do.
And you mentioned there the importance of a plan. What does your marketing plan look like? Is it a sort of like 3-year, lots of post-it notes, fully detailed?
Well, if you find all your post-it notes have gone missing today, it's because I've stolen them, because I love a good post-it note. I just try and think about, you know, what I used to do when I was working for the publishing house is I would actually sit down and write out like a 4 to 5 page overview, I guess, of what I was going to do. And my bugbear for social media and things like this is when people mix up tools and strategies. So like if I say to someone, how are you going to sell, you know, your book, and they say Twitter, like Twitter is a tool, but a strategy is, you know, like, for instance, when I was releasing Mousetrapped, I was very conscious, as Mark has touched on already, of, you know, maybe having 1 tweet out of 10 or 1 tweet out of 20 that was a buy me tweet. So what I used to do is I used to label my shameless self-promotion. So every Monday I would put out a few tweets, and I would hashtag them Mousetrap Monday. And, you know, my followers forgave me for those few tweets, because I was saying, listen, lads, you know, this is promotion, it's happening now, but it's only today, and tomorrow we go back to talking about, you know, coffee and puppies or whatever. And then I released Mousetrapped on the last Mousetrap Monday. So I had about a 12-week lead up to that. So they're the kind of things that you're not going to be able to do if you don't sit down in advance and think about. I just think just sitting down just for an hour and thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it, you know, is hugely important. And I'm not saying you have to stick rigidly to that plan. We've talked already about being reactive. The great thing about all this is, you know, nothing is set in stone. But I definitely think to actually sit down and think about not just this book, but the next book and next year and the year after that is quite important.
And Louise, what does your plan look like? Have you got a huge wall chart with the map
Just
of the
like
world
that.
on it?
Are we keeping post-its in business, basically?
Yes. No, let's call it a more organic approach. I didn't have a plan as such, and I've met a lot of authors who great success with that as well. But definitely isolating what works and what doesn't. So, say things like, I had a greater following on Facebook than I did on Twitter because, when I released my first book, I had no Twitter account whatsoever. It wasn't me. I didn't have any kind of basis for that. So actually getting up and rolling and using Twitter as a tool wouldn't really work very well for me at all. So that's something that I can build it, but I use it more as just an exchange. I don't use it as active marketing because actually it's not something that would have a great impact for me. So it is, I sometimes think it's taking the time, as Catherine says, to isolate, what your plan is, but kind of be realistic about what your approach will be as well, because what will work for one doesn't necessarily work for another. And it can really range, I think, depending on the type of book that you write as well and what people are currently enjoying doing. So I do quite a bit in terms of indirect marketing, probably through social media and things like that. And funny little things, little and large things, so small things that I find work really nicely are, giveaways, for example, just competitions that you run, engaging people that way. And you can get over 1,000 people engaging, and on Facebook in the UK, at least, you're allowed to say things like, if you like and share this post, I'll pick 5 winners and you get a goodie bag and things like that. And it's something that I would say to people starting out, that it can be, say, if you're just beginning and you don't have that much in the way of resources, it can be a bit daunting to think, well, actually, all of these items that I'm going to be giving away and sending, it's stuff that's, first of all, it's a business expense, but secondly, it's really worth doing because be giving. Because actually then it's goodwill as well. People are, so delighted to receive these things from you as well and to really engage with books that they may already like, they may not. You're capturing a new readership, but it's free marketing for you. People are happy to share that for you. It's taking the time away from you. So little things like that even, I think, are worth spending time on.
And you talked there about the fact that you didn't have so much to do with Twitter.
Yeah.
As an author trying to build a career, did you push yourself to use those things because it was important to build momentum, or were there some areas where you just thought, I'm not comfortable with that, I'm not going to worry about that?
I think that I certainly push some areas more than others, but I think it's important to have a presence on every one of them because some readers prefer to engage through Twitter, and so it's nice for them to have the facility to do that. And like I say, I think it's what we've already covered, which is, the circus merry-go-round. You need to cover off every zone if possible, and it's good to take a full service approach, isn't it? So yes, I don't ignore it, but I think that it's just a case of in my business that Facebook has worked more, for example, than Twitter.
And Mark, you've obviously, as you say, you've spent a lot of time building marketing strategies and programs, mailing lists and so on. What excites you about what's coming? You talk about the fact that email is very well established, that some of these other social media programs may come and go. Is there something which is on the horizon for you, which you think this could be really interesting?
I love advertising. Right? So I'm a big proponent of advertising. So Facebook is constantly rolling out new features all the time. So video is quite big at the moment. So I'm quite enjoying Facebook Live video. So you can I could take my phone out now and broadcast to all of my followers right now. So that's quite fun if you're comfortable doing that. Another thing I quite like is Amazon marketing. So AMS, Amazon offers a service whereby you can send ads onto the product pages of books like your book, or you can bid on keywords. So for me, it could be thrillers or something a bit more granular. And until a couple of weeks ago, that was limited to authors in Select, and a lot of my books aren't in Select. So Amazon didn't announce that; it just rolled it out quietly. But I was quite excited by that, and I'm spending very little to get a good coverage of ads across competing pages. And I'm getting good sales for maybe if I sell a box set for $7 at the moment, it's costing me about 50 or 60 cents to do that. So when you take 70% of the royalty there, it's a very good deal. Those are effective ads at the moment, and that's not something that many authors are getting into right now. So it's quite a good time to be digging into that.
And obviously, you've built a tremendously successful career to enable you to invest sums of money. What would you say to somebody who's starting out and in that position? Every euro, every pound is very valuable. How do you find a sort of economical way of marketing and spending money like that?
The Amazon one is not expensive, so you only pay when you get a click. And you can set a limit as to what you're prepared to pay for a click. So if you bid, say, 20 cents per click, you wouldn't be charged more than that. And the actual impression, so that the times that the ad is served, doesn't cost you anything. So it's good exposure for very little cost. So I'd look at something like that. But just in terms of, for social, giveaways are good. That kind of thing is quite good. Just, trying to create content that is shareable. There's no point trying to make something go viral. That's not possible. They either do or they don't. But you can just kind of put out regular content that your readers and your followers can interact with. And the more they interact with it, the more Facebook will reward you with greater what's called organic reach. So they get sent to more people who are following you. And then then just when you've perhaps you've had a couple of books out and you've started to make some royalties, then reinvest that into your business. Look to learn how to do advertising, spend a bit on ads, take that money, reinvest that, and just gradually work up over time. It's taken me 5 years to get to this kind of level, and it was, I remember very distinctly at the start doing little jumps of joy when MailChimp sent me a notification that someone I didn't know, like not my mother or my wife, had subscribed to my mailing list. So yeah, I can remember that quite vividly.
And Catherine, this all sounds incredibly interesting. There's loads of different elements that you could choose to get involved with as an author, but is there a risk that it takes over from the actual writing? And how do you balance that?
I mean, that really is the big challenge. I mean, I personally love all this, and I get the sense from Louise and Mark that you really enjoy it as well. So for me, it's not like, I have to, go and blog or go and do Twitter or whatever. Like, I love it and I find it genuinely interesting. Of course, then you can get carried away. I mean, when I started out in 2010 self-publishing, I was unemployed and I had, all my time. I mean, I was living with my very understanding parents at the time. So I would wake up in the morning and get my laptop, and I would not let go of that laptop until, I went to bed that night. I mean, I was constantly like on Twitter and blogging and everything. I can't do that now. But there's no need to, because I just think that you will find a natural balance. And you have to remember that not every day is the same. So obviously in the lead up to a book coming out, that's going to be a lot busier than, after, maybe a few weeks after release, and you're going back into your writing cave to write the next one. I think you just have to find your own natural way with it. And I do see authors who, spend a huge amount of time on Twitter usually, and I include myself in this, like talking about how we shouldn't be on Twitter and how we should be away writing. But eventually I feel a kind of like natural pull back to it. Like, so, if I'm having a sort of full on, I mean, after my traditionally published book just came out in May, and I mean, I was like full on, just not even sleeping at night, thinking about all the things I wanted to do, and I was going, and the things I did, and it was just full on for a while. And after, maybe 2 weeks after the book came out, I just naturally wanted to step back and, put on my sweatpants and go back to my desk and get back into writing. So I think I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think if you love writing, you will, there'll be a tether, and after a while you'll get pulled back into your actual work. But don't kid yourself that, I love when people say, I just want to write. That's nice. That's called a diary. If you want to actually, sell books, you are going to have to devote, sorry, that was probably a bit blunt, but you're going to have to devote some time to marketing. And, I love it. Like I said earlier, if you write, you are a creative person. Like, you can put that creativity into marketing as well. Like, it's not something that is like and you mentioned, Twitter, you're not as into it as Facebook. Like, don't do anything just because, someone sitting up here said, go and do it. Just do what you enjoy. Because it won't work unless you are genuinely enjoying it. And I'm definitely more Twitter than Facebook. Like, we don't all have to be doing, you know, exactly the same things. But for me, I think you'll find you probably get a bit carried away in the beginning. And then you'll probably go into a state where you're just like, I don't want to see social media. But eventually you will find a natural balance. But you are going to have to engage in both if you want a career as a writer.
And is there a risk, especially when you're writing, and we talked earlier this morning about sometimes you face the writer's block, you face the really difficult times, where social media becomes a little bit of an excuse that you think, OK, well, I won't do that.
I think that's like all the time. Of course it is. I mean, I have had a very difficult few months, like over the summer, trying to write the first draft of my second under contract book, my second traditionally published book. And I mean, it got to the stage where I actually got in behind the sofa and unplugged the power cable that goes to the, you know, UPC box that gives me my internet and everything, because just using the Freedom app wasn't enough, because I was getting my phone and then I put the phone in another room and then I was going to, I mean, I'm a terror for it. But you just have to, it's just a learning process. Like, it is a job, and, you know, you have to figure out what works best for you. And, you know, one thing that worked for me was taking my laptop to a place where I said, do not give me the Wi-Fi password. And, you know, that worked fine. Like, obviously it is a huge temptation, but I would say that the benefits of social media hugely outweigh, you know, any problems it may cause your writing schedule, because some of my, you know, very good friends these days that keep me sane on this writing, publishing process are people I've met through Twitter. Like, writing is a very solitary act, and, you know, especially if you do it full time, these people are your colleagues. Like, these people are effectively your co-workers, and they're really the only ones who can understand, you know, the fact that you've been on Twitter for 6 hours and there's no words written. So I do think you'll find a natural balance, and I do think, look, sometimes, yeah, you'll be on Twitter when you shouldn't be, but sure, it'll all work out in the end. Just unplug the power.
And Mark, do you follow a similar process? You have set marketing time, social media time, and set writing time?
I did a panel with you at London, Darren, you might remember this. I had a question from the floor. Someone said, what's your writing day like? Like that question. So I said, well, in the morning, that's when my creative energy is best, so I'll write in the morning. I tend to stop around midday, might go for a run just to recharge and think a bit about things. Then I'll come back and I'll change tack, and we'll do marketing, promotion, business things in the afternoon. And she looked at me and said, so you're not a full-time author then? After I picked my jaw up off the floor. Anyway, that was a ludicrous response, but it is absolutely necessary. It's very unlikely these days that you're not going to be successful if you could write the best book in the world and just put it out there. There are so many books on Amazon now that the odds of that being discovered are very, very small. You need to acknowledge that, and then be prepared to change gears and do the promotional work necessary to help readers to find it. Once they've found that, then, you know, the effect is amplified, because they will then go out and proselytise on your behalf, and you can start to gain momentum. But, you know, even when you're starting to be successful, there'll always be something to do. There's always marketing things, you know, way beyond just social media. Tax interviews, you know, there are annoying things that have to be done, but there'll always be something that you need to be occupied with. And I just find, it's the kind of the key thing for my business is writing great new content that readers like. I tend to do that best. I'm a morning person, I guess. Afternoons is when I do the kind of, I mean, fortunately I like everything, but that's when I do the other stuff.
And Louise, it's something that we talk about, the fact that you have to discipline yourself to write. You need to find the time to write and give yourself creative space. For many authors, the social media side of things may be just as daunting as the writing side. So is it important to discipline yourself to be involved with social media, to set aside time and do it?
Yes, I mean, you've probably picked, I'm slightly misanthropic in nature. So, yeah, no, you do have to. I'm kind of like Mark generally, so I vaguely apportion my time. So I work best in the mornings on writing as well. And, you know, you also have to kind of balance all of these things. Everything we're talking about has to be balanced with ordinary family life, if you have one, or, you know, the real business of living. You know, it's because it is all career, isn't it? So I write in the mornings, and then usually, I mean, you can't be consistently creative. You're not a drone, you're not a robot at these things. So you do need to take a natural breather and, go out for a walk or whatever. But taking an hour here and there, or whether you want to apportion time in the afternoon to respond to all of the notifications that will pop up, respond to all of those emails, and, do any other business, really, is what it falls under. It is all part and package of the business of being a writer nowadays, and I think that applies regardless of how you publish. I think that everybody has to approach it that way now, because that is how people like to engage with books. And, you have to kind of, I always, if I sort of worry about it, I always step back and think, I am first and foremost a reader as well. So what do I like as a reader? And, if ever in doubt, step back to that and then apply it for yourself as a writer and think, well, this is what I need to be looking at. And so I think actually, it's what Catherine said, find what works the best for you. And I kind of I find Facebook a little bit easier to operate through in terms of the social media side. And it is sometimes just those little things, and you don't have to work too hard at it. You don't overthink it. That's something that people have asked me before. Well, what do I say to people? How do I engage with people? You say, well, for example, the other day, this is how daft it can be. I ate a flake, and the wrapper was just sitting afterwards, and I was feeling quite guilty about it because I quaffed it in about a second. And I looked at it, and it was sitting at me on the table, and I took a picture of it, and I thought, I'll put it online, and it was part of a multi-pack it had on the sign. And so I put it on my Facebook author page, and I said, the dirty evidence. About 10 minutes later, you had 50 comments of people saying, well, I note that's part of a multi-pack, and things like this. And it's just the silliest things that people can engage with and, just have a laugh over. It's humanizing, as we've said before. It's not actually that hard to really just be yourself with these things.
And I think that's an interesting point you made, actually, that authors are creatives, and actually social media could be just considered as another way of expressing your creativity. And so whilst it may seem daunting as a business element of the work, it could also just be a very creative, fun element of it. I guess the flake is a good example of that. Catherine, have you done anything similar? Have you posted images like that, or something?
I don't think the flake lasts long enough to get photographed and put up. No, I'm just myself. I really think that if anyone here follows me on social media or anything, that they are not surprised at all to meet me in person, that I'm pretty much exactly the same. Slightly more caffeinated, perhaps. But I do think there is an epidemic of overthinking when it comes to social media. And, maybe we're partly to blame because we talk a lot about it in terms of marketing and stuff. But honestly, it's been said here, be nice, be genuine, and be yourself. Again, I would go back to, why would you be on Twitter? What do you enjoy when you're on Twitter? What entertains you when you're on Facebook? And just don't overthink it. If anyone says to me, why are you tweeting at this time when you know that 5:05 on a Tuesday is the optimum time to tweet? I'm not interested in that. I don't spend any of my time worrying about that. I just do, what feels right. I'm just myself. And I think, what really works is a mix of, this is what's going on in my book stuff and my publishing stuff, and, this is a coffee I had earlier, and this is a book I really enjoyed, and, just kind of connecting with people. For me, that was especially important because the books I self-published were non-fiction, and they were quite light-hearted travel memoirs. So if the idea was that if you liked my tweets or you liked my blogs or whatever, you would get more of the same if you bought the book. Now, that's slightly different with my fiction because, I'm killing people in it and stuff. So we had to kind of tone down the website had to go from pink to blue and all this kind of thing. But I just think, don't overthink it. Just be yourself, and it's not going to work if you don't enjoy it. So just do what comes naturally.
That seems like quite a good mantra in terms of learning for people who may be starting out. So
yeah,
be open,
there's
be
no
yourself.
reason for it to be daunting.
Yeah.
I mean, I do understand how it can seem daunting. I absolutely get that. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I know people who sit at home and honestly, they look at their tweet for about 5 minutes and they're hovering over the tweet button, will I post that or not? Don't be so ridiculous. Just, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, okay, don't answer that. But just just have fun, and just remember, you know, we're all just interested in what, as I said earlier, entertains us or gives us information that we need, and just try and focus on that.
So, Louise, if you could talk to an aspiring author who maybe is on the verge of publishing their first book, and you could give them 1 or 2 top tips from the marketing side, what would you suggest to them?
Well, I mean, it feels like repetition, but I think from a purely business perspective, I would say, I would repeat what everyone on this panel has said, and get that mailing list started and give yourself a head start for the future, to be honest, because, again, looking back, like Catherine, I would actually really consider, if you are looking to make a business of it long term and it isn't just a one-off and you're not too frightened to try again, then maybe think about writing 2 manuscripts rather than just 1. And that will be easier in the long run, and that's something that I didn't know at the time. So I completely agree with that advice. I think try to distinguish between all of the. There's so much available out there in terms of companies now offering services for authors, and there's some really, really useful companies, and there's things that sometimes you can just do yourself as well. So I think that actually, as with any business, approach it like any self-employed business, which is that, yes, outsource if you have to or need to or can do, but approach it like the CEO of that business. You need to be aware of what any point is, it's happening at any point in that. So take, for example, covers. If you choose to outsource that to a designer, you still need to have a clear conceptual idea about what you would like to see from that designer. Likewise, if you outsource for someone to do the formatting for you to save you time, you still need to check over that formatting to make sure that it is correct before anybody else sees it, and any reader is disappointed that it isn't up to scratch or what have you. So manage it like a business, but always be aware of whatever's going on at any point in time, I think.
Great, thank you. And Mark, I'm going to be very cruel and come to you third. So do you have anything to add to that? If you're talking to that aspiring author, a few key nuggets, how they market.
Be careful.
Right.
Because there are a lot of companies that you've been touched on who will offer to do things for you that you can do yourself at no cost in 5 minutes, and they'll charge $10,000 and offer you things like PR packages to Hollywood, literally. So be very, very careful, because there are some sharks out there. So. And write the next book. That's the best piece of advice, I think. And I also have fun. It's finishing a novel is a really big thing. It's significant to write 100,000 words or 60,000 words or whatever it is an achievement which should be celebrated. So I would say press publish, go and get drunk, then come back and write the next one, and just have fun.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. Well, that seems to sort of sum up a lot in a nutshell. But are there any questions left? Is there anybody who would like to ask a question from the floor? Gentleman at the front here.
You mentioned earlier using quoting reviews as part of promotion. Just to make sure, do you have to request permission from the reviewer or from Amazon in order to do that, or is it considered fair game?
Well, we have 2 lawyers, ex-lawyers, on the panel. There's a fair use law that allows you to quote, I can't remember the exact word count, but it's a number of words from a review, and 70 words. So, yeah, I think that's fair as long as, obviously, you use it in a fair way. But, yes, that's fine.
Yeah, like if they say, this is brilliantly awful,
Yeah.
You can't just be like, brilliant, Yeah.
I had one I had a press review for my first book, and she pulled out something that was basically a terrible review, and then it was like, this is about as good as it gets. You change the way you say it. It's suddenly become. I didn't do that, honestly, but it's tempting.
Yeah, and I think certainly if you're quoting Amazon customer reviews, I would be very careful about that. And as I think we touched on here, usually Amazon review is a fair way of doing it rather than putting somebody's name. Now, if you want to reach out to them and ask them, if you can sort of find them, then so be it. But I think it's always very careful to sort of, if you do get a good review, is to think about the person who's written it as to how much interaction you need to have with them. And if you're just going to say, it's a great read, I encourage it, that's great. But if you're going to start putting lots of information and their name, then I would talk to them.
Just like Amazon readers have said.
Yeah. I think it often happens that you'll have, an Amazon review, I think, will often appear under those kind of things. I think in most cases, journalists, if they've written an article, would like to be quoted. It's, it's part of them developing their business. Whereas if it's somebody that you have no interaction with and they are, an individual, then you can't always be certain of that. So I think an Amazon review would be a great way of doing it. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, the lady here.
If you have a review and it says, this book is like, and insert famous author here, and if you like this author's book, you'll like this one too. Can you quote that using the famous author's name, or do you have to get permission from their publisher as well?
No, I think that would be fine. I think that's, as long as an individual is expressing their opinion, I think that's fine. I mean, again, I'd always be sensitive as to the actual nature of the review. You don't want to be saying, this author is so much better than Stephen King, who is a complete, whatever. I wouldn't use that. But if it's, this book is in the style of Lee Child or is as good as whatever, I mean, that feels like a fair comment. Yeah.
Thank you. And one other question, Louise. The one that you have there, The Holy Island, is that traditionally published in that actual paperback format, or was that done by CreateSpace?
That was all CreateSpace, yeah.
And did you do that yourself?
Yeah, all of it.
Okay,
Yeah,
right, thank you.
so,
It
yeah.
looks very professional, and I've been
you.
looking at CreateSpace, and there's a lot of maths involved, and sums and galleys, and I'm completely flummoxed, so...
Well, that is actually an area. So I create the cover, so the ebook cover comes first for me. And, get that all pretty and up and running and things like that. Because actually the biggest market for my sales is in ebooks, as a lot of people who independently publish do find. But it's nice to have the option, and particularly for review copies. So whether you want to bring out the print copy at the same time, or whether you want to have a slight delay, or however you want to do it, you can usually take what you've created and outsource it if you want. That is a time when I would outsource as well, actually. And there are a lot of people out there who can very, very quickly convert it into the parameters that you need, because that's more of a slightly more complicated approach, because you have to think about the amount of pages, you have to look at the margin sizes, all that sort of thing. So
That was completely freaking me out. So.
Well, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Or there are Amazon experts who can talk it through in the other room if you'd like to
That's
talk
right.
somebody there. Whilst Louise is entirely right. Yes. Any other questions? There's a lady in red at the back.
My question is about keywords. Is there any magic search engine word you would recommend for emerging writers, please?
Would like to answer that.
I actually don't worry about keywords at all, so maybe I should, but I think you'd be better placed.
Yeah, I can probably answer that. I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about it, but there are some quite neat tricks you can do with keywords. Amazon only give you 2 categories to put your books in, but there are a number of what they call browse categories that you can get into if you use keywords. So one, top of my head, I think if you use vigilante as one of your keywords, you can get into a subcategory of crime thrillers.
Write this down.
There are if you do a Google search for Amazon browse categories, then you'll come back with these kind of magic keywords that will get you into those categories. But I mean, apart from that, don't use things like you're not allowed to use things like free or discounted or other author names. Amazon will ask you to take those down. But I just say concentrate. Try and think of 7 words that sum up what your book is about and the kinds of words that readers who might like your book might be thinking of as they're searching for you, and just try those.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Yep, there's a lady there.
Thanks. You just mentioned call to actions there at the very beginning, and I was just wondering, when you upload your file, when you want to put a new call to action in at the end of a book, maybe to say you've written a new book or whatever in an older book, do you have to upload the whole file again, or is there any sort of a shortcut way of approaching that?
Yeah, you need to upload it again, but it doesn't take long. If you just need to add a page at the end and just re-upload it, and 6 or 7 hours, and it'll go live.
Okay. Any other questions? Vanessa, do we have anything on social?
Coming in on the marketing side, there were a lot of questions earlier about how much time you spend on marketing, but I think you answered that pretty well, and we got a really good idea, of the way you split your days. I think it's just really interesting to hear that it's the sort of message, isn't it? It's not hammering out the the marketing message and saying buy my book. It's very much building the reader engagement and choosing the thing that's right for you. So I think it's really you've covered pretty much everybody's questions. It's been great.
Do we have time for one more?
I think I saw a hand.
Gentleman
here.
in the scarf, I think, has a question.
I think there's one down here too.
Yeah.
Go on.
Maybe we have time for 2 more.
Yeah.
You mentioned blogging quite a bit. Now, I know what you're saying, like stick with what you're enjoying, but I know lots of writers hate blogging. What do you blog? What kind of content? Like you've mentioned giving value, which is easy to see what value is in non-fiction, but what do you consider value in fiction? What kind of info? Well, no, you've covered that. Oh, and finally, another part of that question is for Mark, your Facebook group. Could you let us know the name of it?
Mark
So they can
Wilson,
join.
author.
No, for the group, for the people you were saying that help each other out with.
Self-publishing formula. Sorry.
So just the question is the blogging, like what?
I don't mind taking that one. The thing about blogging is, like, I may be a bit blunt here again, I'm just warning everyone. Don't overthink it, right? So, first of all, if you don't enjoy blogging, don't do it. That's the number one rule. If you feel it's, you know, ugh, what am I going to blog about today? Or I haven't blogged in a while, I need to. I really don't think you're going to attract readers when you yourself are not feeling enthused about blogging. If you're a writer, it's presumably because you have something to say. And blogging for me, like, I have to do it. Every now and then I just have to press a little release valve and get a blog out there because it's something I genuinely enjoy. And when I was self-publishing, the posts were quite instructional. So they were like, this is how you put in page numbers if you're making a CreateSpace interior, or, you know, this is what I did to launch my book, or, you know, actual like step by step. I mean, I had a post, one of the most successful posts on my blog of all time is how to stop Amazon in the US withholding 30% of your earnings when you're a non-resident. So it was really very much instructional. Nowadays, because I'm, you know, a lot of that is out of my hands and I'm just, you know, an author, I blog about all sorts of stuff. So like I blogged about why Jurassic Park is my favourite novel. That's something I talk about frequently. I might blog about, you know, I mean, I'll go home tonight and I'll probably blog about this in some way. Just, you know, I mean, the number one question I would ask myself is, do I read blogs? And if so, what do I read and what do I enjoy? And, you know, it's the same thing with books. Like, why are you writing a book? And why are you writing this kind of book? And is it because you enjoy, you know, do you enjoy crime and that's why you've ended up writing crime? Like, I enjoy blogs that are kind of lighthearted, you know, a bit funny, not taking themselves very seriously, and might occasionally point me in the direction of a new place I can buy stationery from. And that's the kind of thing I put out there then. So I think, you know, there is such a danger of overthinking it. Always come back to yourself. Like, what do you like? What do you enjoy? And if you don't enjoy reading blogs, I wouldn't even bother, you know, to be honest, to be blunt yet again.
So there's the key message. Do what you enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, don't do it. And I think that feels like a perfect place to end. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.